Hello and welcome back to the TeaTime with Teens podcast, a place for teens to grow and be understood, and a place for parents to learn and understand, all while diving into God's Word. So I want to thank you for listening into this episode, and as you can tell from the title, in this episode we're going to be talking about colorism and tokenism. So without further ado, I'm going to get right into that. But first I want to mention that if you're watching this video or listening to this episode, please subscribe, follow my podcast, leave a like or comment down below if you like this episode, and stay tuned for more content like that. You can see my Instagram account at TeaTime with Teens, where I post a lot of content there as well regarding the podcast in general. So if you're interested in content and conversations like this, definitely consider following and subscribing. Anyway, we're gonna get into the topics of tokenism and colorism. So a little background. I wanted to dive into this topic specifically because it deals with the Black community and things beyond that, and it's Black History Month. Happy Black History Month. So that's kind of a little background by why I chose to do this topic now. Also, I've been seeing a lot more conversational videos regarding this topic, and it's definitely given me a little bit more insight. Nowadays I feel like colorism is more so talked about in texturism, but I feel like we kind of forget about where some of the stuff came from, and that's tokenism. So I wanted to get into that in this episode. Now, if you don't know what tokenism is, I'm going to provide you with a definition, so let's go and look it up. I think I'm going to look it up on Urban Dictionary because I found a really good definition there. So from the Urban Dictionary, it says tokenism is a minority that was deliberately put on a show or movie for the sake of being culturally diverse. So that's kind of the view of tokenism that we're going to be discussing today. And then we'll get into colorism as well. So like it mentions, tokenism is when they're putting in people, characters of a different race or ethnicity simply to appear as more culturally diverse. But it actually does the opposite, and it's very detrimental. So the thing with tokenism is studios are getting complaints from, the audience saying, I want to see myself in these films. I feel like I don't see myself represented. There's mostly, the majority is white folks, stuff like that. And so they're like, we're going to be hip, we're going to be modern, we're going to put, say, a Black person in the role. And you want to know what kind of role they're going to give that Black person? Or, Asian, Hispanic, they're going to give them a side role. And this was more prominent, I'm thinking more so like 2000s, 90s in this context. So they were usually given, the side character that helps the main blonde character grow and all that kind of stuff. Really don't have too much backstory for them. They don't really have much depth to them. They're usually one-dimensional, and nobody really ends up liking them unless they're like really funny and have really cool one-liners. But other than that, they're usually used for comedic relief and things of that sort of nature. And I know growing up that was always kind of, as a kid, I never really got tokenism to a certain extent. I used to actually hate it when I think about it, because I was like, each time I see somebody that looks like me, it's like they always have like the boring role. They never get a love interest. They're always just supposed to be smart or supposed to be funny, and you never really get to understand anything about them. I know I saw this with High School Musical. I haven't watched Clueless, but I feel like Clueless maybe has some tokenism. I'm not really sure because I haven't watched Clueless. But there's always, that one Black friend, if you know what I'm saying. However, when I was looking up a study, I'm like, well, how do children identify with characters? Like, does it really matter what race the character is? Like, how much is that a factor in if they like the character? Because I know it wasn't really that big of a factor for me personally. So I looked at this website, and it was basically analyzing a report that Scholastic had did. I think it was a report for families or something like that. If you don't know, Scholastic is usually where we get a lot of our books for, the book fair, stuff like that. So it's specifically children's books. So I kind of want to read off what the statistics were or percentages were concerning this survey that they conducted on children and their parents concerning different books. So in the survey, it said that 27% of kids want to see characters similar to themselves. Notice that they say similar to themselves. It doesn't necessarily mean like similar physically, but it could also mean similarly emotionally, in terms of what they believe, in terms of what they like. And 36% want a smart, strong, brave character. 30% want someone that overcomes something. And this was conducted on kids ages from 6 to 17. And this, again, was the Scholastic Kids and Family Reading Report. So notice that they don't really mention race. And I don't really know if that was an option in this survey. I'd have to check. But kids want to see somebody who's similar to themselves. And that's ultimately who they're going to gravitate towards. So I think when we're thinking about tokenism, what tokenism gets so wrong is they see kids just want somebody who looks like them. They just want somebody who looks like them. And yes, kids do want somebody who looks like them. But they want that in addition to somebody that they can relate to. And something that some of these executive producers, companies are getting wrong is they're just forcing diversity. Just diversity, there's a Black person here, Asian person here, but they're usually not interesting. They usually don't have any depth to them. And ultimately, all people of all different races, genders, ethnicities, they're going to relate to a character who, like they said, is brave, is strong, that has to overcome something. Because I know a lot of time we see nowadays, with female characters, where they're a Mary Sue. They're basically like the male character, but they're as strong as the male character. They don't have to overcome anything. And companies are like, you're just, misogynistic, or, toxic masculinity. You just don't want to see females in the role. No, we want to see females in the role. We want to see people of different descent in the role, but we want them to overcome something, because that's how we relate to them as characters and as people. That's how we, pick up on certain things, and how we, want to see things. We want to see ourselves represented, not just physically, but also mentally, spiritually, all these different ways. So I thought that was a really interesting part of the study, especially, like I said, when I think back to my, I guess I'm still in my childhood, when I was like, younger, watching Disney princess movies, I feel like everybody wants to assume that because you're Black, your favorite Disney princess is Tiana. And maybe I'm wrong with that. Maybe people don't assume that. But Tiana was honestly, this is maybe a non-popular opinion, but Tiana was never my favorite Disney princess. One, my parents were Christians, so like half the time, I don't think they even showed me Princess and the Frog. I got Whitney Houston and Brandy version of Cinderella. That was like my Black princess. But I didn't really, when I did see Princess and the Frog, I didn't relate to Tiana because she was Black. She overcame something. Also, side note, Tiana was only like Black in the movie for like 10 minutes, to be honest. The other time she was a frog, so I mean, they were trying, but they didn't really do anything. Maybe I'll do a separate video about that, because I have some real beef with Princess and the Frog, to be honest. And we definitely need another Black Disney princess that's not Ariel. So maybe I'll do a different video about that. Anyways, going, back into the actual topic. My favorite, princesses, my favorite is Belle. And you want to know why? It's because she was strong. We both like reading books. She overcame something. She got a love interest. I mean, there was musicals. And the same thing with Whitney Houston and, Brandy, their Cinderella. It wasn't because she was just Black. I appreciated that she looked like me, which is super influential, but that was in addition to the fact that she had to overcome something, that there was this grand musical moment and she got a love interest and things like that. So it was genuine representation. I actually love that movie, the Whitney Houston and Brandy Cinderella. I know that's not the actual name, but that's what I call it. That one had some great diversity in it. So now that I've talked a little bit more about tokenism, I kind of want to get into it's kind of, little cousin, little friend, which is colorism. So let's head back to the Urban Dictionary to get a nice, popular definition of colorism. It says colorism is racism within members of the same race, for instance, light-skinned African Americans, looking down on and discriminating against darker-skinned African Americans. It says it can be just as harmful as racism perpetuated by whites on blacks as well. So colorism, like it said, is like preferring somebody of a lighter skin tone. And this can be across various cultures, not just Black culture, but obviously it's Black History Month. I'm Black, so I'm going to personally speak from what I can somewhat relate to and what I actually somewhat know about. So the thing with colorism nowadays, we've kind of gotten off of tokenism. I mean, we're not as hard as on tokenism, I feel, nowadays when it comes to characters that are Black in main roles, if that makes sense. Like I said, in the 90s, the 2000s, tokenism was definitely prevalent. But nowadays, I feel like companies have, gently waved in more so into colorism or light-skinned, biracial privilege, whatever you want to call it. And so now they're like, okay, we're going to give you characters. We're going to give you Black characters that are in depth. But the thing is, when they do this, they usually cast somebody who is of a lighter skin tone. More specifically, they're usually, biracial, meaning they have one white parent, one Black parent. You get the idea. So I'm going to call these people biracial because they're made of two different races. I don't want to just refer to them as Black because they look Black. So I'm going to say biracial. But my thing is, my problem isn't with biracial people, having roles that have more depth. Like, that's not my issue. They should definitely have roles that have depth. My only thing is, I feel like it's a misrepresentation of both communities, of the biracial community and the Black community. Because when they're hiring these biracial actors, they're usually hiring their parents in the movies and the roles to be two black actors, two dark-skinned black actors as their parents, when in reality that's not true for most of the people that they're casting, because they're biracial, so they have one white parent and one black parent. And I feel like that can be very harmful when you're growing up and seeing that, because I remember with Zendaya specifically, you know, obviously she's a biracial woman, great actress, and Shake It Up on Disney Channel, you know, she was the black girl. Specifically, we know she's biracial now, but you wouldn't know that because in the show they had both of her parents were black, and like darker skin tone black, not even like light black, you know. And so as a kid you're kind of like, that's suspicious. I obviously understand what she tried to do for the black community with Casey Undercover. I definitely do appreciate that, but I also wish that, you know, biracial children would be able to have representation that's genuine to them as well, where they can see themselves, you know, in a character that also happens to have a white parent, happens to have a black parent. Because I feel like when you're putting them in these roles that maybe they can't necessarily relate to, then also actual biracial viewers are like, I never get to see my family represented on TV. So I feel like that's a bigger issue in itself, a separate issue, but it kind of ties into that colorism aspect. And maybe when it actually is a black actor, they might cast somebody of a lighter skin tone, or maybe somebody who's supposed to represent an African American community, and they could be, you know, Dominican, Hispanic, or, you know, from a different country, so and so, like that. Again, not saying that these people shouldn't have roles. I'm just saying that their roles should also expand and represent their community as well. So if you want to cast like somebody who may be Jamaican black or something like that, you know, maybe have a story about a Jamaican family. I mean, just make it authentic to where that person is from, you know, so that they can feel that, at least sometimes when they're playing roles, that they can relate to the whole community atmosphere that that show is portraying. So that's kind of my issue with that. And again, it's definitely detrimental to young black girls who are of darker skin tone, you know, brown skin, dark skin, all that kind of good stuff, you know, to see somebody who actually looks like them in sense of skin tone that is being able to have more depth in a main character role. Because sometimes they'll put us in those little, they may have like black diversity, but the main characters that get all the love interest may be light skin, and maybe the side characters will still be of a darker skin tone, even if the whole show is about the black community, which I think, like I said, is very harmful, and we have to watch out for those sort of things because it could be sending mixed messaging to different viewers. Ultimately, nowadays, I do feel like diversity has definitely gotten better as the years have went on. You know, we've kind of shifted from tokenism. We might have still a bit of a problem with like secret tokenism or like colorism mixed all together in there, but nowadays you are seeing more genuine representation where different communities can be seen on screen. You can see that with Miles Morales, even though he is black and he's portrayed by a black actor. His the fact that he is Afro-Latino is portrayed in the film, that he has a Hispanic mother and that he has a black father, you know, African American father. I think that's very important for kids of different biracial backgrounds and just backgrounds in general to see. And the same thing that you see with Encanto, you can see that every kid can relate to that sort of story and it's just enamored by it because they love the musical. They don't really care about the race of the character because they're able to relate because the character is overcoming something, they're growing, and they can relate to that. And I also see that kind of with, you know, some of the older shows in the 90s and 80s kind of did a good job of this at first, you know, until it went downhill. Like, you know, the Huxtables or Fresh Prince and stuff like that had more so accurate representation and different forms of representation that was very positive as well. Ultimately, kids internalize a lot, so it's very important to think about the messages that we're sending through the different televised programs that we're putting in front of them. And so that's, again, another reason why this is so important, why I wanted to do this episode. And yeah, that's basically my thoughts on the situation. Definitely voice your thoughts in the comments below. And without further ado, we're going to get right into the weekly Bible verse. So the Bible verse this week is going to be coming out of Psalms, chapter 121, verse 1 through 8. I've been reading in Psalms lately, actually finished, so this is one of the notes I picked up from that chapter. And it reads, I look up to the mountains. Does my help come from there? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let you stumble. The one who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel never slumbers or sleeps. The Lord himself watches over you. The Lord stands beside you as your protective shade. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon at night. The Lord keeps you from all harm and watches over your life. The Lord keeps watch over you as you come and go, both now and forever. Again, this is coming out of Psalms chapter 121, verses 1 through 8. I saved this about a month ago, and I just thought it was such an interesting verse because it's like, God will never sleep on you. He's always there to listen to you and answer your problems and take care of you. Like, he's always watching over us. And sometimes people can be like, I don't know if I want somebody always watching over me because, I've done some things. But it's like, no, even when you've done those things that maybe you're not proud of, you can still go and talk to God because he already knows. He knows your motive behind doing it. He knows where your heart was. He doesn't mean he agrees with that. But it does mean that he understands where you're coming from, and he ultimately wants to uplift you to a level where you don't have to live and feel all that shame. And I think that's something that's so important for us to remember, is that God is always there. He's always there to talk to us. And I just want to remind you to keep reading in the Word of God, because ultimately his Word is the way he talks to you. And if you're able to sense where he's coming from and get more insight into how he's seeing you and what he wants you to do in your life, it's going to make you so much happier. You're going to have so much more joy. You're going to be just on the right path. And I think it's so comforting to know that the Lord is always there. He's always watching over us, and he always wants the best for us. And he's never going to leave us ever. Even when other people might leave us, he's still going to be here. I sound a bit country there. But yeah, that's the verse for this week. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, this video. Please, again, follow my Instagram. I may be coming out with a TikTok page, not really sure, but I'll definitely update you on that as well. And yeah, I pray that you have a blessed week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.